Hello everybody, how's everybody doing? We have an exciting day in physics today. Terrible day for mathematical physics, sorry. But great day for physics. And what is this side about? This side, rational science. We're about rational science. That's what we're about. That's what we're about. And why is our site rational? Well, because we do everything differently than everybody else out there. What does everybody out there do? Well, they do this. They do ether. They do particles. That's the world out there. Everybody does everything with particles. Okay, and even when they do waves, you know, they do particles. This is their wave model of what's moving there, particles. That's what you see vibrating there. And so a wave is a motion of particles. That's what it is. What do we propose instead? Well, we propose a universe that is interconnected. For the first time, we have an interconnected universe. We're saying all atoms are interconnected. So whereas the rest of the world has this vision that everything is just discrete particles running around, we have an interconnected world. So that's what's new, that's what's different, okay? And so this takes us to some of the differences. You've got the rest of the world, they have descriptions. They don't have an explanation, a mechanism that you can sink your teeth into, the majority out there at least. And they're also in the movement of concepts. Instead, we're in the world of explanations. We explain mechanisms, and we're in the movement of objects. Another difference is their atom. The atom that people use out there is the planetary model that we've inherited from Rutherford and Bohr. That's the little electron bead that's going around the bowling ball. And that's what we use, or what they use at least, for ionization, electricity. That's the atom they use. And then they deny it. We have a different atom, so just be aware. So whenever we talk about the atom, we're about explaining things with our atom. We've got a different atom, therefore the explanation is going to be different. And you can find out a lot about this in the book, downloadable book. It's in the description. Okay, so it's a free book. You can download it, and it'll put you up to date on the rope model. Another difference with the rest of the world is this: we have a different scientific method, or a different version of the scientific method. Okay, and we put mathematical physics in its entirety under religion. All it has is irrational theories, irrational proposals. And one of the reasons for that, among others, is that it relies heavily on evidence. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Okay, and one of the people who emphasizes evidence is the fellow we're going to talk about today, Richard Dawkins. He's a biologist. Okay, and I don't know if he's a biologist because he's never defined the word life, and that's what biology studies or analyzes, tries to explain. And so he never defined it, and so I think of him more as a caricature of a scientist. One of the reasons is, you know, again, he works without definitions. He doesn't use definitions. They don't have definitions in all of mathematical physics, and obviously in biology they don't seem to have many definitions either. They can't even define life. I know paleontologists have no idea how to define a mass extinction or a background extinction. You look at background extinction, and what do you find? You find a rate. Mathematics. A rate of background extinction. And so nowhere will you find in the world of paleontology an analysis of how one species dies, because there is no term, no notion of no concept of the disappearance of one species, except the only one we're concerned about, well, maybe a couple. One is Neanderthal and the other one's woolly, because those happened relatively recently, right, a few thousand years ago. But then all other species that ever existed on planet Earth, they never talk about the disappearance of one species. How did one species disappear? No, they talk about the rate of extinction. the rate. How many were dying in the background, whatever that is. So no, they don't have any definitions anywhere, and Dawkins is no different in that sense. Okay, and Dawkins synthesizes his notion of science in one of his presentations, and he says the following. He brings up the parable of the old teacher. He had an old teacher, and he says one of his teachers believed in the Golgi apparatus. He said it was an artifact, that he didn't think it really existed. And that's what he taught for 15 years. He taught his students this. And one day a cell biologist from the United States apparently gave a lecture and demonstrated, right? We demonstrated science, right? We prove beyond all possible doubt, skepticism, doubt, religion, right? That the Golgi apparatus was real. Okay, and our old man strode to the front of the lecture hall, shook him by the hand, and said, "My dear fellow, I wish to thank you. I have been wrong these 15 years. And he says that all the students applauded the fact that this guy proved their teacher wrong. Okay, and so good old Dawkins uses this as an example of what science is all about. Okay, he said that is science at its best, and he says that's the very opposite of faith. That's knowing when you're wrong and even being pleased to be disproved. So there you have it in a nutshell, Dawkins' view of what science is and what it's supposed to be and what it's all about. Okay, and yeah, we have a little problem with all that. I'll get to that today, and that's what the talk is about essentially. And so what does Dawkins do? He says, he talks about faith. Okay, he says, what baffles me is the way that our society has limply bought into the idea that faith should somehow be treated with exaggerated respect. I guess he's talking about quantum mechanics. You know, all this faith that all these people have, no one questions it. Okay? Even secular individuals have come to accept the idea that faith should somehow be immune to criticism simply because it is faith. Well, you would gladly criticize somebody's political views or artistic tastes or their football team, etc. When it comes to faith, we are all expected to back off. Yeah, I guess, again, it looks like he's talking about quantum mechanics. I mean, you know, you can't challenge that. You have to have faith. Otherwise, you're deemed as a crackpot, right? Without this convention of good manners which pervades our society, faith couldn't withstand criticism because it has no resources with which to do the withstanding. Yeah, he's talking about mathematical physics in its entirety. Faith, that's all they have. Faith because they have, all they do is just talk about, you know, what they proved, what the evidence has convinced them of. That's what the whole thing is about. And I'm not going to put words in their mouth. They're putting words in their own mouth. Here you have more examples of that as we go along. Just keep an eye on that because that's the issue with Dawkins. He says, evolution is only a theory. People say this, you know, against the evolutionists, against the people who you know, paleontologists, biologists, geologists, in general, all these people vouch for the theory of evolution. And you have on the other side, usually the Christians, at least in the Western world, and they say, well, no, we believe in God, and we think God did all this, you know, and he set things in motion and so on. And God made us like we are in one piece. And so this is where the debate comes in, right? And so what does Dawkins say? He says, it is ironic that this only a theory actually stems from the non-arrogance of science. Okay, because scientists are careful enough and cautious enough to say that everything they know is only a theory. Okay, yeah, I agree, because science is only about theory. So the question is, you know, where does all this evidence thingy come in, where they try to prove theories, which means that they convince someone of their explanation? That, you know, the convincing part That's got nothing to do with the theory, with the explanation. And so they emphasize the evidence, the belief, whether you believe in the theory or not, the proof part. That's all religion, but that's what they emphasize, not the explanation, the objective explanation. That's where we have a problem. Okay, and so he says everything is, they know it's only a theory, which is just awaiting disproof. Again, proof? No, we don't prove theories. What does he mean, the theory is awaiting disproof? Does he mean that people will stop believing in it? Is that what he means by disproof? So it's a question, they were believing in that theory, in that explanation, and now they don't believe in it anymore because someone disproved it. So he's emphasizing the proof part, not the objective explanation, but the subjective proof, what the evidence showed to you. Not to me, but to you. That's the issue, okay? And yeah, the crackpot index, if you want to offend one of these guys, all you have to say is, oh, evolution is only a theory. Oh man, that'll drive them up the wall. It'll drive them up the wall. Say, what do you mean, just a theory? It says 10 points for arguing that a current well-established theory is only a theory, as if this were a point somehow against it, okay? Yeah, so if you want to offend one of these mathematicians, all you have to say is that their theory is only a theory. Oh, it's just a theory. Yeah, and so he clarifies that. He says, oh, no, wait a minute, we got to clarify this thing. And that's when the theory morphs into a fact. Very slyly, okay? It says, the word theory can be used to mean something that is speculative and tentative in common everyday speech. Scientists often use it in a much more positive sense. I think that the easiest way to use it, theory, right, is in the ordinary language word fact. You see where he's going with this? He's turning his theory into a fact. He shoved it down your throat whether you like it or not. In the ordinary language sense of the word fact, evolution is a fact. Okay? So now the theory somehow morphed into a fact, So interesting. I thought we were going to talk about science. We were talking about objective science, what someone explains to someone else so that they can ponder and think about it and go home and say, well, what this guy said makes a lot of sense, or it doesn't make sense, or whatever. No. They're emphasizing you have to believe it because we've just turned it into a fact. The theory, the tentative theory somehow morphed into a fact. Right in front of your very eyes. Metamorphosis, that is what it's called. Okay? And so good old Dawkins says, the evidence that makes it a fact is partly fossil evidence, okay? Partly comparative evidence, looking at modern species and comparing their bones, their organs, their structures generally, and especially their molecules, their genes at the molecular level. This is extremely persuasive and powerful evidence. What is evidence used for? To persuade, to get you, to convince you, to get you to change your mind, to accept the theory as a fact. That's what evidence is for. That's why we don't use evidence in science. It's only in religion where they use evidence, because the point of evidence is to persuade and convince. And good old Dawkins never realized that in his 100 years of schooling. Okay? So we have a problem with his notion of science, this notion that people have that, oh, I'm going to run an experiment. Oh, what are you going to run the experiment for? To collect evidence. Oh, what are you going to collect evidence for? To persuade, to show that my theory is a fact. For now. Until someone disproves it. So that's what these people think is the scientific method. Proof and fact. And then disproof and verification and evidence, coming from another guy who said, I got new evidence. All of relativity is wrong. All of quantum is wrong. Because I have a new evidence. So it's a question of persuading people. And the question is, can you convince of everyone on planet Earth, the 8 billion people today, right? Can we convince them that evolution is a fact? And I'm sure if we run the microphone, through all the congregations out there, the Buddhists, the Hindus, I think we're going to find a lot of people that won't like this theory of evolution. They'll say, well, no, God made us like this. And so the question is, it's a fact for whom? What do you mean, a fact? But see, this is what they have in their mind. They believe so much in their theory that it's converted into a fact, and they spread fact, like preachers and pastors. They're no different. They're no different. They spread this out not as something objective, they spread it out as a fact. Okay? And nobody believes them anyway, because a lot of people out there still continue with their belief, because that's what they're being taught in Sunday school. Okay? See, it says, more evidence again, when you compare the genes of animals and plants, you find that the pattern of resemblance is a branching tree, and that branching tree could only be a family tree. Okay, this is an explanation. If you explain it like that, no problem. Don't bring your fact, your belief, your shoving it down my throat kind of thing, you know. Just tell the theory, you know, your explanation, and we'll consider it. The jury will consider it, okay? Other very persuasive evidence. Again, persuasive evidence. That's what they're into. And it's not only him, it's the entire mathematical establishment. This is what people learn in high school and college, that science is about persuading through evidence, okay? And then when you go to Sunday school, they have different evidence, a different type of persuasion comes in. They do it through the book, the good book. And every religion has their own good book or good books, right? Is the geographic distribution of animals and plants on islands and continents. They are exactly where they should, or we should expect them to be if evolution is a fact. Is a fact. And again, he can't get rid of those words, evidence and fact. Okay? He doesn't talk about really theory, because he knows that people listen theory and they say, oh, it's tentative. It hasn't been proven. And he said, no, it's been proven. It's a fact. That's what he wants to emphasize, make sure you understood. All creatures are the result of millions of years of natural selection. Okay, and one of the problems there, and that's with that term natural selection, there are different versions. I'll get into that. And one guy asked him, says, is there a conflict between evolution and religion? Okay? Because maybe there is no conflict, and maybe you know, he's spinning his wheels for nothing. Okay? So he goes in there and he says, uses an analogy. He calls it, or a parable. It's the parable of the Improbable Mountain. Okay? And he says, what if you went up to the top of the cliff, right, and you found an eye? Well, he says, you know, that eye is so sophisticated. It's one of the most sophisticated organs in our body. You know, it's very unlikely, very improbable that it was made in one shot. Okay? It took a long time to make this thing. It's like, you know, when you build something in your garage, in your shop, you know, you don't build something in 2 seconds and say, voila, you know, like by magic. No, it takes time. You have to put the screws in there. You got to build the thing, right, step by step. And that's more or less what he's talking about. He says, you know, that eye is up there on the mountain. You found it there. You're not going to think that that eye was made in 2 seconds with a magic wand, okay? And so you have these two possibilities. One is that the eye just climbed up the mountain in one shot, just jumped up there. And the other one is the evolution, the version, which is the slope there, the step-by-step approach, that this eye took millions of years and went through all these different stages to be built. So the improbable mountain is that you can't do this with a single shot, like God waving his magic wand. No, you got to do it step by step, he says. Okay? Okay? And again, that's the objective explanation. No problem there. Okay? Some people believe it, some people don't believe it. It's not a fact to everybody. Some people accept it, some people don't. Okay? And people say, well, Bill, what do you think? Irrelevant. I'll keep it to myself. Okay? Because the issue here is not what I believe. It's what I can explain. When you call me to the conference, say, Bill, explain evolution. then I'll give you my version. I'll explain evolution objectively, and I'll try, because it's very human to try to do so all the time to convince people, I'll try not to persuade and convince and convert you. My only intention really is for you to listen to my theory of evolution or my theory of God or whatever, how we got here, okay? And I can explain it to you, and you take it for what you want to take it with, okay? It's up to you. What you believe or not is irrelevant, at least in a scientific context. Now, if you want to talk religion, belief, what people believe, well, let's go to the bar, get a couple beers, or go to the water cooler, and we can do some small talk. But if we're going to do science, we got to leave it strictly to objective explanations. Now, in the course of explanation, of course, we get excited and we try to convince the other guy, no, I'm correct and you're wrong. That's essentially what you're saying, right? We all do that. It's very human to do that. But we at least have to be able to distinguish that that part is the religion part. That's what good old Dawkins has not realized yet in all his years of studying. So he says, he continues, he says, well, eye along the slope is a little bit better than the one before it. I mean, you have all these incremental steps where improvements in the eye, right? And at the end of a long period of non-random natural selection, you've accumulated lots of these steps, and the product is far too improbable to have come about in a single step of chance, a jump. Okay, so he's putting the weight of rationale behind evolution. And there's nothing wrong with that, like saying, look, let me show you why William of Occam's rule, is applicable here. You got to look at the most sound, most common sense version, and this is the most common sense version according to Dawkins. So he says, but if he stops there, he's okay. But then he goes on and he says, that's why you should believe it. That's why it's a fact. If you deny it, you're an ignoramus. That's where we have a problem. Okay? Because now he's trying to shove it down your throat. And that's okay, because in the sense that, again, if you're at the bar and you just exchange opinions, that's fine. Anything goes there, because you're doing small talk, you're doing ordinary speech. But when you go to a conference, when you talk to the masses and you say, look, this is what I propose, that's where you should stop, okay? And let people make up their own minds, and not, him telling him that's science. Science is not the explanation, the objective explanation. Science is the belief part, the faith part. He's got a faith too. So he criticizes faith, but he's faithful. Okay, he wrote a book called The Selfish Gene, in which he essentially outlines some of his ideas on evolution. Says that's what drives all organisms, including human beings. The prime aspect of that of evolution is reproduction, he says. That comes from Darwin, right? Says, so what drives all organisms, including human beings, the drive to reproduce their own genetic makeup, okay? Sounds like he's interpreting there, but at least, well, if that's his interpretation, fine, no problem. That's pretty standard Darwinism. In any era, the organisms that live contain the genes of an unbroken line of successful ancestors. It has to be true. He introduced the word true. Now we have truth. We found out last week that for Mahatma Gandhi, truth is God. And so he says truth is something else. Truth is evolution. So we have differences when we start using these vague words, these opinionated words. It's the truth. Well, the truth to whom? To you or to me? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about the objective explanation, or about truth and about what is a fact? Okay? Plenty of the ancestors' competitors were not successful. They all died, but not a single one of your ancestors died young, or failed to copulate, or failed to rear at least one child by definition. Or otherwise, we would be here. That's what he's saying, okay? You have therefore inherited the genes which are a non-random sample of the genes in every generation. Non-random in the direction of being good at surviving. Okay? So that in a nutshell is what evolution is about. Okay? So he's essentially exposing the worldly wisdom again among biologists, paleontologists, geologists, all these people out there, so-called scientists, right, that study evolution. Well, they all believe in this synthesis. Okay. He continues there. He says the following. He says, in the selfish gene, he said, we have in our genetic makeup the drive to persist, to accomplish goals. This is genetic, he says, this drive that we have, this push forward, okay? Natural selection favored persisting in seeking goals, like, for example, hunters who followed herds until they caught what they needed to survive, right? Nowadays, we hunt money or, or a nice new house, or we try to finish a novel or a political victory. So he thinks, because we have a problem here, we have a difference with what Darwin really said, and different people picked up different pieces of what Darwin said, and they use them in different contexts. We have to be a little bit careful about that. And here are, when you look up, the evolution, the natural selection thingy that Darwin came up with, you find the 4 points of Darwin's theory of evolution. And they are: individuals of a species are not identical. Okay. Traits are passed from generation to generation. More offspring are born than can survive. And finally, only the survivors of the competition for resources will reproduce. Well, there's a little bit of a problem with a lot of these things. They're very general, okay, and that's good as a foundation for a theory, to present an objective theory, okay? No problem there. What is the problem? The problem is that people understand different things from this. And here, let me show you an example here. We have two versions, at least. I think there's more, of the theory of evolution. And one is the one that Darwin had in mind, which is reproduction. You reproduce, the guy who reproduces the most kids, those are the ones that survive, or have a better chance of surviving and reproducing more, and so on. And so those are the lines we have today, the ones that reproduce the most. Then you have the business guys. They understood something totally different from Darwinian evolution. They think in survival of the fittest, because they're thinking always of not of how many kids they reproduce. They don't care about that at all. That's biology. That's something else, physiology or whatever. No, they're into something else. They're into competition. Oh, you have to compete against the enemy. Who is the enemy? The guy across the street. The guy who opened up the same type of store that you did. So you opened up a restaurant, he opened up a restaurant. And COVID shut them both down. Okay, so they're thinking of competition. They're thinking of rugged, laissez-faire capitalism, survival of the fittest. Well, that's a little different than saying the guy who reproduces the most. So, what is the theory of evolution? Which aspect of it are we talking about? And again, we have all these little variations there. That you pass your traits on, genetic stuff like that. That's also a different notion than what these guys are saying. So we have different notions, and I can only give you my notion. Okay, here's Bill Gaede's notion of evolution. You'll hear it here for the first time. Okay, this is a different way of visualizing evolution. This is my synthesis of evolution. Okay, and it goes like this. It's he who hasn't died is alive. How do you like that? You say, Bill, you're crazy. What do you say? What do you mean he who hasn't died is alive? What does that have to do with evolution? Well, I give the example, and one day I had this when it came to my head. There was a spider, and I threw something on it, a stone or something, and killed it. And out of her belly, it was a female spider, and out of her belly came, I'd say 100 at least, little tiny spiders, just moving away from ground zero. They were running for their lives. And I was stunned. I saw all those. I had killed a mother, and her back broke, and all these little spiders came out. I killed them too afterward. I couldn't have these spiders inside my house. So the issue was, and I started thinking, well, you know, evolution here. Again, I give the example of the 5 Neanderthals. They're in a cave, the last 5 Neanderthals, and a stone falls on them. You know, and that caused the extinction of the Neanderthals? No, what caused the extinction of the Neanderthals is how they became 5. That's the mechanism we have to zero in on. But these people never picked up on that, and they look at, again, evidence. They look at stuff that has no relevance, and among those we have this competition thing between species. We outcompeted the Neanderthals. That's how they disappeared. They have these notions. Why? Because, again, we don't have a good grasp of what evolution is. And I'm saying that throughout history, you have the sifting of death. So death kills, you know, we have the scythe, the Grim Reaper, comes in and kills whatever, plants and animals. Just kills. Whoever the Grim Reaper doesn't kill, that's who's alive today. So that's another version. So we have the version from the reproduction point of view, which I just showed that is not necessarily right, because here we had the spider had 100 kids, and I killed them all, so none of them survived, even though she was very fertile, very prolific, and none of them survived. She may have outcompeted other spiders or other insects, whatever, that she ate, and it didn't help her much because I killed them all. I stopped her lying right there and then. So death was a little more important than reproduction or competition. And a lot of it has to do being at the right place at the right time, or being at the wrong place at the wrong time, you know, that sort of thing. Maybe you're unlucky. Maybe you're the toughest guy in the group. You're the most physically successful, etc., etc., etc. You were going to have 10 kids because you really had the fertility built in you by God or by Mother Nature or whoever. And it turns out you die. You don't get to reproduce. And this little weakling, you know, little guy with his glasses, he goes out there, he has sex, he doesn't die, and he has 10 kids. And so did the survival of the fittest, was that the guy who made it here? No, it's not the fittest in that sense. It's whoever didn't die at the wrong place at the wrong time. So we have different notions of evolution. We have to try to zero in on these notions because we have like too many things in the so-called theory of evolution. That's why I don't like to talk about fact either. I want specifics. What is your theory of evolution? So you explain it to me objectively, and then we can deal with that. But to say that, oh, the theory of evolution is a fact and you got to swallow it and we're going to shove it on every kid in school, whether they like it or not, I don't know about that. You know, there are opinions and opinions. And one thing is, yeah, you can teach that, no problem. I have no problem with teaching evolution. But, you know, on the other hand, I have no problem with the religious folk presenting their stuff in school as well. You don't have to take it as truth. On the contrary, I think it's a good way of comparing things out there. Like for the kids to make up their own mind. Okay, here's the evolution. Here's what the church does, you know, or what religion does, or, you know, so-called religion, and you compare them and let him reach his own conclusion. And you might say, well, they get enough of that in church, you know, at the Sunday school. And to some degree, that's also true. You know, they don't teach evolution in Sunday school. So we teach evolution in school. You teach God and whatever in Sunday school. So that's how the world is divided. Okay. Where did I come from? Where did we come from? Well, as far as I know, I came from my mother, you know, and I think she came from her mother and so on. But they ask him the question, there's no reason why we are here. Okay, no reason. Okay, I was using why in the sense of the explanation. What is the ultimate purpose for which the universe came into existence? I believe there isn't one. Okay, If instead you ask, what is the purpose of a bird's wing? I can say that in a special Darwinian sense, it is to help it to fly, therefore to survive, therefore to reproduce the genes that gave it those wings that make it fly. Okay? It's a silly question, so don't ask it. Religious people are asking a silly question. Maybe they're asking a silly question, but you gave the wrong answer. Okay? Let me give you my answer to that question. I got that in my book, Why God Doesn't Exist. And this is what he should have answered. Dawkins has not figured out what the question entails. In the instant context, the question of why, purpose, reason, invariably implies a thinking entity that set everything in motion with a goal in mind. So whenever you ask the question, why are we here? And it turns out it's one of the questions that you'll find under physics, which shouldn't be there, because a why are we here is a question of philosophy. It's a question of purpose and reason. And it already implies a creator, for lack of a word, an intelligence, whatever you want to call it. Okay? It involves that someone had something in mind, a goal in mind for humanity, for the universe, for whatever matter. Okay? The question, why are we here, is already biased in favor of God. It already embodies God. It already embodies intelligence. That's what he should have answered. Not saying it's a silly question, you shouldn't ask it. No, you can ask it. I'll just give you my answer. My answer is that you're already implying God when you ask that question. That's what you're asking. The question comes down to, why did God create us? For what purpose? That's what the why question in that context means. And that's why, so you can't just dismiss it and say it's a silly question. Well, maybe it is a silly question, but that's not the answer. The answer is, your question already embodies God. It already includes God inside that question. That's the problem. So the guy who asked it is already assuming God. And that's what you got to point out to them so that they're aware that that's where the problem is. Okay? And so what do they say instead? Well, they say it was self-created, the universe self-created, and therefore, of course, there's no purpose because the universe, there's no intelligence there that kicked it off. It's just a mechanical process, but then they can't explain the mechanical process of how nothing becomes something. They come with all these concepts such as energy, and they say, oh, energy, we had positive and negative, and it broke up, and we created matter and gravity. What is that nonsense? That's mathematical gibberish. That's all that is. Okay, summary conclusions on good old Dawkins. Here it is. My point, my vision of good old Dawkins, especially on this issue of evolution, more as a scientist, right? He's not a scientist. Scientist doesn't emphasize belief. He should be aware of that, and he's not. Neither none of these guys out there that do the circuit, talk circuit. Dawkins harps on evidence, proof, and fact. That's why he's not a scientist. That's a preacher. What you see there is a pastor, a guy, Bible-toting, pastor saying, believe, have faith in quantum, in general relativity. That's all he's saying. He's talking about proof and evidence. Why should you believe? Because here we have the evidence. That's why you should believe. And what's the evidence? That a particle can be at two places at once. What's the evidence for a warp, four-dimensional space-time that nobody can even imagine? So obviously they have no evidence, but they say they have proven it, and they say, oh, these people believe in God. So what do you believe in? You believe in four-dimensional space-time. How are you any better than they are? You also are spreading belief. Just like it's a clash of beliefs. That's all it is. That's not science. And he accuses traditional religionists of relying on belief and faith, yet all he talks about is his beliefs and faith. Okay? Dawkins swallows Big Bang and space-time like candy. He gawks and drools at quantum tunneling, entanglement, and particles at two places at once. So how is his stuff any different than what they preach in Sunday school? Therefore, Dawkins' faith is actually more irrational than the one he criticizes, because at least I can imagine God, and making, here, he's got his magic wand, I got mine, okay? And he goes, abracadabra, and suddenly the universe comes to be. Fine, I can imagine at least that. I can imagine God with a magic wand. Cannot really imagine how he made that in 0 time. That's something the religionist has to prove or explain, really, right? Explain the mechanism. But Dawkins, he cannot even imagine. I cannot imagine what they're proposing in mathematical physics. So I don't know what he's talking about faith when he accuses the religionists. He is a religionist. Dawkins isn't even a biologist because he can't even define the word life. And biology is the study of life. You can't define the word life, and biology is a study of life, then you are not a biologist until you can. Only then will we know what your discipline is about. Okay, let's get on to the fan mail. See what we have today for the fan mail. I got a lot of fan mail, so I can't get through all of it. They're just overwhelming me lately. And I'll do the best I can here with a few of them, some of them related to the issue of today. That's why I'm going to pull some of these God issues. One guy said, there is no evidence that we can exist without a creator. Well, for that you have to define the word exist, and then we'll know whether you exist or not. Okay? He's got this notion, I guess, that existence comes into being. And no, existence, we exist. Exist is not a verb, okay? So you can't say, or you can't have this notion that existence comes into being. That's that creationism from nothing. That's the one people associate sometimes with existence. And no, that's not existence. Existence, you got to define existence, and that's which has location, an object that has location. You can't have location and come into being at the same time, because before you come into being, or in the process of coming into being, you have no location. You probably don't even have structure. You're not an object to begin with. So that's the part you got to explain. Okay, that's where the tricky part comes in. Okay. Another fellow asks, here it is, says, no motion for God. God has no motion. I guess God is just a static image, it's like that, made of a single piece, like a cardboard image. And yeah, the reason they talk about that is, or one of the things I think is going through their minds when they say something like that, there is no motion. They don't want to be tied against the wall. So when you say, oh, when God moved, there was time already. So they don't like that because now God can't create time because he already had time within him. And so now you got a problem. So they say, well, God had no motion. So what are they referring to? Well, usually what happens in all these cases is they have different definitions of God. That's what it comes down to. They have this God, the Old Testament God, or in other religions it's about the same thing, so we can use the Old Testament for all of them. The people 2,000 years ago, they believed in a human God. God was, made of arms, had arms, he had a belly button, he had, testicles. That was God. That was the God of 2,000 years ago. And all these books that we have today, they come from those days, from a long time ago, hundreds of years ago. And the problem here is that, people use those books to prop up their religions, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Hinduism, Muslims, Christians. They use their books. And their books talk about this God with testicles out there, who has a big fat booty and sits on a throne. That's the God that's in the book. But that's not the God a lot of people, especially the new generations, believe in today. A lot of people believe in this intelligence. God is love, God is spirit, God is an abstraction, So they've turned God, that was, human-like, they turned him into this figure. They turned the figure into this abstraction. That's what the problem is. And so by turning God into an abstraction, they're not following their own religion, because that's not how their religion began. There was a change in their religion. If you look at the Old Testament, God is clear. God is a human-like figure. He made us in his image, period. Okay, he made us out of clay. When you get to the New Testament, oh, God metamorphed completely. He morphed into a spirit, into love, into intelligence, and a lot of stuff that we have today, abstractions. So the God of today, so you can't, the problem here is that the Christians can't go and use the Old Testament if they're not going to use the God of the Old Testament. And same for the Muslims. If they're not going to follow the God of Muhammad, then they can't use the Quran. And so on down the line to all of them. You got the same thing with Buddha. Buddhists today claim, oh, well, we don't really have a God. Yeah? Go read their books. Mara the spirit. You look it up. M-A-R-A, Mara. And she, or he, he was a little spirit. So, Buddhists have gods also. It's just that the modern Buddhists don't want to pay attention to them, but then they tell you that their religion is 5,000 years old or whatever. You can't have it both ways. Either you follow the religion of your ancestors or you created a new religion and don't believe in that stuff anymore. If you don't believe in that stuff anymore, don't bring those books as authority because you don't believe in that book. That's the issue. And I think this is one of the issues here. This guy is not thinking of a human God that moves his arms. So he says, God has no motion. What are you talking about? Then how did he create the universe? And then he might say, well, he didn't create the universe. God is something else. Okay, then you got to define what God is. You can't just stop there and says God has no motion. Because then you have a contradiction. Okay, because we're going to use the God of the Old Testament, the God of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. We're going to use the God of the Sumerians against you. If you don't like that God, you got to tell us what your God is. You have to tell us what your God is. This is where the problem is. People have different gods. And so when you attack one, they say, oh, you'd raise a straw man. What do you mean I raised a straw man? I got that straw man right out of the Bible. God the Spirit through the surface of the waters and so on, created the universe. Okay, another one. God is an eternal being by definition. Your notion of God is retarded. I don't have a notion of God. That's why you reject these things only. Your notion of the one true God is utterly idiotic. Absolutely love this. Okay, what's the problem? Well, the problem again is, you got to tell the jury, the people out there, the crowd, what is God? And so is God of the Christians? Because I don't know if this guy's Christian or what. An object or a concept? That's all that anyone who talks about God has to answer. Is God an object or a concept? Object is that which has shape. Concept is that which doesn't. Does God have shape or does God not have shape? That's all you got to tell me. Can you draw a picture of God? Can you not draw a picture of God because God is an abstraction? Which is it? You can't have both. Either God is one or God is the other. God cannot be an object and a concept because then we don't know what you mean by God. Okay? And then again, is God a human-like creature, an anthropomorphic being, or is God love, intelligence, time? What is God? So you got to tell me what God is. Don't say that I don't propose God, so don't ask me that I have a wrong vision of God. I don't have any vision of God. It's the person who's proposing this hypothesis, this proposal. He's the guy who's got to tell you what God is. He's got the microphone, not me. He's the guy who's giving the presentation. He's giving the conference. He's giving the talk. So if you're giving the talk, you got to tell me what God is. You got to say, you don't say, Bill, you got an idiotic notion of God. I don't have any notion of God. You tell me what God is to you. You got to say, no, God is this, Bill. This is where you're wrong. See, if you present me your God and where you got this from, maybe you got it from the Bible, maybe you got it from the Quran or I don't know, the Pali, whatever books of antiquity. It depends on you got to tell me what your God is. You're giving the presentation, not me. I'm going to use God, the God of the Bible. And I use the God of the Old Testament because that's the one related to creation. Okay? That's why I use that God. And that's the God that a lot of people out there believe in. The more ignorant they are, the more they believe in an anthropomorphic God. The more studious people, the people who went to the university, they say, I don't believe in that human-like God that's got arms and a magic wand. No, I have this other notion. He's an abstraction. God is intelligence. He's spirit. And, so they go through all these tangents. They try to get away from punishment. That's all they're doing. Just tell me if God has shape or doesn't. That's it. That's all I want to know. And if you would say God doesn't have shape, no problem. I'll attack that. And if you say God does have shape, I'll tear that God apart as well. So I've got arguments against both. So don't say, oh, Bill, you have a wrong definition of God. I don't have any definition of God. I use your definition. Whatever definition you've got, just bring it on. No problem. I'll take care of it. Either way, whether God has shape or God doesn't have shape, I'll tear them up to pieces one way or the other. You're God, because you got to know what an object is, what a concept is. That's where the problem comes in. Okay, and again, when we talk about existence, you've crossed the line into physics. That's a question that does not involve religion or philosophy. Existence belongs exclusively to physics. Physics is the science of existence. All we deal with is existence. Another guy says, oh, God is not a complex concept. When you start to walk in correct path, all mysteries and questions will be solved in your mind. Oh, good. I need a solution to all my problems. I think God's, right, exists, and it made us to help him to solve the problem of infinity. So God's got a problem with infinity, see? So we got to fix this problem. It's a mathematical problem. The God or gods also use mathematics. Well, okay, so God uses mathematics. I guess he's got a slide rule, maybe a calculator, I don't know. Humans should use this tool to understand and distinguish truth from falsity. Again, truth, falsity, all that is opinion. Hopefully God, if he's out there, well, hopefully he doesn't have opinions. Maybe he knows instead of having opinions, right? But we humans have to use math to get opinions. Know the difference between false and truth. Yeah, go ask the 8 billion people. Let's see if they all agree on what's false and what's truth. And again, that's why falsity and truth have nothing to do with science. Okay, we reject all that stuff sweepingly. Just brush it aside. Okay, another fellow asked a little more intelligent question or made a comment. He said, is a rocket object which is traveling against gravity a living organism? I'm unable to figure that one out. Help! Okay, I defined the word the other day, life. I did it for a biologist, so-called biologist, Dawkins. And I usually use the brief version, which is the one I used, and that's the one he had a little trouble with. So here's the more formal version. Let me put it over here. And it goes like this. A natural object that moves against the path of least resistance. I don't always include natural, and I do it, sometimes I do it on purpose, sometimes I just forget or take the shorter version. The reason I don't include the word natural is because it's understood that it's natural. All artificial, things that we create that move against gravity, like little airplanes and so on that we make, even toy airplanes, a kite. We have a lot of stuff that moves against gravity, which is all artificial, made by us humans. So I don't include anything that humans make, robots, androids, whatever you make out there, except babies, that's different. That's Mother Nature. See, but we don't really make it. Okay, it's made by Mother Nature's process. Okay, so babies, that's Mother Nature. But if we make something like artificial, like with our hands outside of our body, right? We make something, I don't include artificial stuff. You can include it within the living thing if you want to include it under that definition. The only issue there is, what's the purpose of including a robot that flies or whatever in the definition of life? What would you use that notion for? That's why I don't always include the word natural. But yeah, I'm referring to natural objects, the ones Mother Nature did, right, made, okay, that moves against the path of least resistance, typically against gravity, okay? So that's what it is. Things such as a robot or a little airplane or whatever, that a balloon. It's not alive just because it moves against gravity, because we made all those things. Okay, and one guy, that guy made me laugh. He says, "I absolutely despise him." Okay, thank you. Love you too. Okay. Yeah, he absolutely despises me. Okay, why does he despise me? Well, this is something I can recommend to him. Okay, and it's a song. He should look it up, and it says "Losing My Religion" by a group called REM. Okay, comes from a very interesting album. It's called "Out of Time," and it says, "That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion, trying to keep up with you, and I don't know if I can do it." So yeah, the poor guy is frustrated. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, don't hold it against me. And what I suggest here is what Mr. Lincoln said. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, you heard of him? And he said the following. He says, "In your hands, my dissatisfied mathematicians, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of defining words." Abraham Lincoln, great man, he said that. Okay, so yeah, you have to define your terms, and if you don't define your terms, you're going to run into trouble, especially in this side, right? We're going to attack your definitions. And so this fellow comes up and he has a definition of the word object, okay? And this is what he proposes. He says, irrational science definition of object, that which has shape. He doesn't like it, okay? If we draw a circle on a paper with ink, the paper, the dry ink, and circle are objects. The liquid ink used is not an object. It holds no shape of its own. He's putting words in my mouth. You know, no, I don't know where he got this, okay? In dictionary definition, the paper and dry and liquid ink are objects. The circle is a concept. Okay, the dictionary definition is clearly more rational. Okay, let's address these issues. Let's see what the counterparts to his arguments are. And so the question here is the following. Concepts are defined as abstract ideas. This is according to the dictionary. In other words, we don't know what a concept is. We don't have a definition from the dictionary. And here you can see it says concepts are defined as abstract ideas or general notions. This is out of the Wikipedia, that occur in the mind, in speech, or in thought. And so what are abstract ideas? Well, you look up abstract ideas and notions, and when you look up the definition of ideas and notions, you find the word concept. In other words, we have no definition of the word concept. All we have is synonyms. We don't know what a concept is. At least, mathematical physics, the world of science out there, so-called science, they don't know what a concept is. And they don't know what an object is. Because these are definitions. The first one is the dictionary. The second one from the wiki. It says anything that is visible or tangible and is relatively stable in form. And the wiki says a collection of matter within a defined contiguous boundary in three-dimensional space. Again, that which you can touch or see. That's the notion people have. And we cannot use that, first of all, because, those are touch and see are verbs. So you cannot you cannot use touch and see as criteria to define the word object, because you have to define object before you define seeing or touching, two verbs. You need some other object to do the touching anyways. So it's a wrong way of doing definitions. The other issue there you see on the top, can this fellow tell me which one of these is an object or a concept? Field, energy, mass, force, interaction, these words that are used by mathematical physics. Which ones are objects, which ones are concepts? Is God an object or a concept? Does God have shape, or does God not have shape? Or whatever you think an object is. Please, can you touch God? Can you see God? Is God an object? When they say that God created the universe with his magic wand, that his spirit was flying over the surface of the water, and that he made us in his image. Obviously, he's talking about an image. He's talking about, something that has shape. And the question is, if it has shape, I can see it. If you draw it, I'll see it for sure. So the question, does God have shape or does God not have shape? And that's the question that kills all religions that introduce the word God. Okay, so that's one issue. Then there's this other issue. Why is a circle a concept? Again, what is a concept? And if you look up these words, you find abstract ideas. What's abstract? A conceptual process. Concept is a concept. Abstract is an abstract. That's all they said so far. What is an idea? It's an abstract concept. What is a notion? It's a defined term or concept. So what did we learn? Well, we learned that concepts, ideas, notions, and abstractions are all synonyms. That's what we learned. So far we don't know what a concept is. So why is a circle a concept? And then the other one is, why is the dictionary definition more rational? What do you mean by rational? And you look up rational, it says based on or agreeable to reason. What is reason? Making sense of things. In other words, they're all synonyms. We don't know what making sense of things is. The guy who believes in God, is he sensible? Is the guy who believes in space-time, is he sensible? Has he made sense of things? So we don't have definitions. That's why definitions are so important, and we harp on definitions until they hurt. We put our finger right there where it hurts, in your open wound. Because definitions is what kills modern so-called science. They don't have any rational explanations for anything today, especially in mathematical physics. Black holes, dark matter, ultra-heavy, invisible. Why? Why did they end up with that? In great measure because they didn't define their terms. That's where the problem is. That's one of the biggest problems. Okay, and this also says the following. He says, look up the 5 processes or steps of the scientific method. He says, and you look them up and you Google them, and you'll find this. It comes from the Khan Academy, especially. Make an observation, ask a question. This is the scientific method, okay? Form a hypothesis or testable explanation. Make a prediction. So we're into astrology, and they call this science, okay? Based on the hypothesis, test the prediction. We're going to test a prediction. That the stars are going to cause you to be nice or good or bad? Is that the prediction we're looking at? Or that my horse is going to win on Sunday? Iterate. Use the true results to make new hypothesis or prediction. Okay, so these are the 5 steps according to what we find out there. This is what I Googled. He asked me to Google. That's what I Googled. Okay. Okay. So what's wrong with all this? Let's show this gentleman what's wrong. And here it is. Religion of mathematical physics. That's what this is, not the scientific method. Predictions, the stuff of astrology. Science, we don't ask anything. We tell. That's what science is. Science, you got to explain, not ask, or criticize. Criticism is okay, no problem, but criticism is not science. It's explanation that is science. Hypothesis is not an explanation. So to form a hypothesis, I don't know what they're talking about. Hypothesis means many things in the religion of mathematics. And in science, it means assumption. Theory is what is an explanation. In science, we don't test anything. Testing is equal to technology in one context. In the other context, it's evidence, proof, persuading, belief, opinion. In other words, religion. Testing, anyone who asks to test, approved, to present evidence of an experiment, what he's doing is religion. You can do all the experiments you want at home, no problem. When you come to the conference, we don't want your experiment. We don't want you to do an experiment because all you're going to be doing is demonstrating that you're right, that you have a reason to believe what you believe, or you have a reason to believe your theory. We don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't care if you had a bad dream and that's how you came up with your theory. When you come to the conference, we want you to explain your theory. Hopefully, you can make a movie of your theory, and we could just watch it and objectively understand what you're proposing. That's where science does. What continues is religion. So yeah, no, when you Google, what you find is nonsense. You don't find the scientific method. Okay, we had an issue with the Brachistochrone Curve. And I want to solve that today. Again, I want to rub that one in as much as I can. Okay? And so let's start. We have the Andromeda Galaxy. That's that little smudge there in the night sky. That's how we would see it. Okay, if you have good eyesight, otherwise you need a telescope and you would still see something vaguely that looks like that. Okay, so that's what Andromeda looks like in the night sky. What is the problem? Well, the problem is that Andromeda is 2.5 million light years away, meaning that if we traveled at the speed of light, if we could travel at that speed, it would take us 2.5 million years to reach there at that speed. What do the mathematicians propose? Well, they say, look, in a straight line of sight, that's 2.5 million years. But if you take the shortcut through the curve, it only takes about 10 seconds. You got to take the wormhole express. So if you go through the wormhole, you go much faster. Now, let's clarify. The red line, they say, is, well, that's through space, through three-dimensional space, as they call it. So you're going through nothing, because that's what space is, nothing. On the other hand, if you go through the green line, well, you're not going through space, you're going through time. You're going through a different dimension. That's the issue, okay? And so what is this wormhole thing, this curved wormhole? Well, it looks something like this, okay? This is your curved wormhole, and you can go from one end to the other much faster than they say that if you go through flat space, that flat space there, that net, that straight net, that flat net, well, that's space. If you go through there, it takes you much longer in a straight line to go from one point to another than if you go through the curve through time. That's their argument, okay? This is what they're saying. And in fact, what was it, a couple weeks ago, we had Mr. Al-Khalili, and he was taking the Wormhole Express, okay? He was traveling through the wormhole, and he claimed that you could go much faster through the wormhole if instead of going through space, you went through the wormhole. So this wormhole is a magical thing where it allows people to travel much faster than if you travel through space. And this wormhole is a passage through time. That's what you have to distinguish according to these folks, okay, the proponents of this theory. What are they saying? They're saying that here you have flat space-time, and here, give it a second, it starts now. Okay, and here you have flat space-time, okay, and that's the standard fishnet of general relativity, and we usually send the photon through this flat space-time that somehow they curve around, and instead it's the wormhole that they make straight. So the curved wormhole turns into a straight wormhole, and a curved and a straight and a flat space-time they turn into a curved space-time. So the photon is dumb and it takes the long route. Well, we can beat the photon just by going through the straight wormhole. That's more or less the notion that these people are trying to convey to you, okay? And so the question is whether this is even mentally possible, okay? Well, you can even imagine, this just seems to me at least, right, that is totally surrealistic, okay? So what is the problem? Well, the problem is I posted to this fellow. He had a comment originally when I showed what nonsense the wormhole is. This traveling at the speed of thought through the wormhole, through a one-dimensional time tunnel of some kind. You can travel in a few seconds across the universe. Well, yeah, people would love that, so they could see the whole universe and are not limited by the speed of light or anything less than that, right? And so, people are fantasizing. And so this guy says, no, you're wrong, Bill. See, this is how he started a couple weeks ago. He says, he misspelled it. I think he's a foreign student or something, maybe Arab or Chinese who's still learning English or whatever. It's the Brachistochrone Curve. And he says, light is traveling in a curve as the fastest route. And he says, yes, a curved wormhole would be faster than across the straight path. He's convinced of this. The shortest route is not the fastest route. Okay, so where did this lead us? Well, it led us to the issue here. Got them at the bottom, so I got to pull them up. To the Brachistochrone Curve, which is that center one there, the one in the middle. And you can see that a ball goes faster than going through the straight line. And you would say, you could even guess that it's maybe twice as fast, okay? See, when it reaches the one in the top is about halfway down the line, okay? So it is faster, yeah. But you can see that also the one in the center is faster than the one at the bottom, the one that is more curved. And one of the issues here is that what we're looking at here, we're relying on gravity. The reason these balls are falling is they rely on gravity. What does gravity do according to the religion of mathematical physics? It warps time. Okay, so keep that in mind. We're going to warp time here. Remember, time was a straight line from Andromeda to us through the wormhole. It's a straight line. Well, gravity is going to warp that. I mean, if we're going to use the Brachistochrone curve to simulate speed, right? We're going to use this tunnel to get there faster. Okay, so keep all this stuff in mind. And so here it is, just so that you can see just a schematic of that. And it's that curve number 1 is faster than number 2, which is faster than number 3, which is a straight one. Okay. Okay. So give me a second here. So this is what I pose to people, anyone who wants to deal with this issue. Here we have our little rocket, and it takes 2.5 million years at the speed of light, right? Going through space. What is space? Nothing. So you have no resistance whatsoever. You're not traveling through molasses. You're not traveling through water. You're not traveling through air. You're traveling through nothing, if we're going to use that word through, right? On the other hand, these guys are saying that you can travel through time much, much faster, like you see the rocket there. And the question is, how can time be less restrictive than space when space is nothing? What kind of material, slippery material, could time be that you get there in 10 seconds? Okay, that you get there at the speed of thought. So this is the issue. This is the question that we must solve. Okay, this is the issue before us. Okay, and again, this guy proposes the Brachistochrone curve, and so this is what he answers. This is what he answered. The last answer I got from him, I thought he was going to give me an explanation of how you go through time, why it's so much faster, and not just a statement saying it does so. And he came back just again with a statement, a description, not an explanation. He came in the Brachistochrone curve. To understand why it's the fastest route involves understanding the golden spiral Fibonacci sequence. Whoa, okay, so now we have, let's find out. And so we look it up and let's find out what he's talking about, right? And this is what he's talking about, okay? He's talking about this thing, which apparently is something mathematical. It says a logarithmic spiral, okay? The golden spiral gets wider or further from its origin by a factor of blah, blah, blah for every quarter turn it makes. That's a description. That's just a statement. We have no explanation for why it does so, what causes it, right? The why here is in terms of cause mechanism, not in purpose reason, okay? The shape is infinitely repeated when magnified. Again, just a description. Made from quarter circles tangent to the interior of each square. Description, description, description. And right at the bottom, I say it synthesizes, this golden spiral Fibonacci sequence is a description. That's all we have in front of us. And so, yeah, Fibonacci is a fib. Fibonacci. It's a fib. It's we have no explanation right now. And so he did not give us an explanation. Okay? And he just added on that just a little more authority, saying, he says the Brachistochrone curve used in everyday ordinary engineering. Okay, so it's used in engineering. We still, that's, again, it's authority. He hasn't explained anything. He hasn't explained why we get to the Andromeda Galaxy in 10 seconds, whereas traveling through space, through nothing, right? It takes us 2.5 million years if we travel at the speed of light. So we have to explain that enormous difference. That's what we have to explain. And we have to explain, certain things here. And these are the things I ask, again, one more time, for someone to explain who vouches for either the Brachistochrone curve or for getting to Andromeda in 10 seconds. Either way you want to see it. You have to identify the medium. Okay, what is the medium? You say it's time. We need a little more than that. We need to know, one of the things we need to know is what's the encapsulate, what's on the outside of that medium, whether it's filled, this tunnel is filled with molasses or water or air. What is it filled with that makes you go so fast? Why is it so fast? What the cause of it is, you know, the cause behind the speed. That's what we were looking for. And then the what is this medium? You know, allegedly a tunnel is filled with, that makes it so much less resistant and with less friction than space, which is nothing. So if this is used in ordinary engineering and you claim that it is how we can travel so much faster to the Andromeda Galaxy, faster than light, traveling in a straight line, you shouldn't have any trouble justifying answering any of these issues. Okay? So that's, again, we don't have an answer from this fellow or anyone. There was another one who tackled it. Again, he went away. Shoo! Phew. Okay, and the final issue here is, well, not the final. Here's the rope version of this. I pointed that out the other day, and that's for anyone who wants to tackle the problem, why the balls going through the curves are faster than the one going through the straight line. And I gave you a hint the other day. I'm not going to solve this problem for you. I want people to think out there. So you can see the angle of A, alpha there, is greater than the one for beta, okay, according to the rope model, because what we're doing here, we're attaching an atom at the center of the ball to two arbitrary atoms on Earth. And you can see what happens when the ball moves. If it's attached, you can see that the angle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, that's one hint. Okay, for the speed, because remember this is a gravitational phenomena, and in the rope model, ropes mediate gravity. And here's the other hint, which I showed the other day. One more time. Again, these ropes are coming from the edge of the Earth, not from the center. Keep that in mind. And you can see what happens with the ropes and the atoms, right? The atoms, you started with 3 atoms that were not aligned, but as the ball falls, the atoms become aligned. Okay, what I mean by aligned, they're on the same axis. And I showed, again, last clue here, the case where all these guys are pulling on each other. In other words, specifically Andy against Bob. Charlie can pull against Andy, but he cannot pull against Bob, or he pulls against Bob and not against Andy. If he pulls against both of them, he disappears essentially. He's irrelevant. The only way Charlie, we can feel, Bob and Andy can feel his mass is if he steps out of alignment. So those are the 3 clues, okay, for anyone who wants to tackle. And again, you'll find more information in the rope hypothesis, the book, in the description, downloadable, etc. Okay. Okay, the other issue that this fellow had raised, now let's attack that one as well, and finally, right, so, and it's light bends around the sun, damn sure not roped in any way. He's saying that light bends, okay, and so the question is, what is bending? A photon is bending? How do you bend a photon, okay? Okay, so the first issue is, you know, are we talking about a photon bending, or is the itinerary being deflected? Are we talking about bending or deflecting? And again, all these people, they can't understand even the difference between bending and deflecting. A series of photons can deflect around the sun. And if you say light bends, then you're saying the photon bends. You can't use the word bend if you're going to talk about a photon. If photons is what you're going to mediate light with. So what are you saying? The photon bends, he twists and turns? Poor little photon. Then you have the issue of ray reversibility. Okay? And ray reversibility, I did this in a little cartoon that I made, a couple cartoons. And one is that ray reversibility shows that light always travels straight. In such a short distance, there is no bending, no Brachistochrone curve. Okay, so that's the other issue. light travels always in a straight line, because if it were in a curve, why would it retrace its path, which is what ray reversibility is. One of the phenomena amply verified in optics. Okay, and here's another aspect of light that shows that it has to be straight. Okay, and here you have the quantum version, the particle version. The guy's throwing stones at the target. How can he hit the target all the time if he's throwing stones? Why would they travel in a straight line? And with a rope, it's straightforward. You know, it's a taut rope, so you have torsion. But in case of the wave, you're going to shake it up and down. Again, what does this have to do with straightness? Okay, so if you're going to do the standing wave or the transverse wave, you got to explain why that wave is straight. Okay, and the other issue with the standing wave is, in order to simulate it, you got to tie it at the other end. Otherwise, you can't simulate. You know, I do it with a rope. You move it up and down like this. Well, you got to hold it at the other end. If you don't hold it, you can't do straightness. Okay, so keep that in mind. You can't do standing waves with a rope, at least, if you don't tie it at the other end, which shows that, yeah, it's connected at both ends. And at least as far as I'm concerned, it shows that all atoms are interconnected. Okay, and the rope is pulled taut. Okay, and here's another version of another aspect of light. Okay, one is that the object can go anywhere at once, and the rope will always find it. The light will always find it. The other one is that, you know, light travels in both directions simultaneously. Torsion. Okay, so the object can move anywhere it wants. Light will always find it. And here you have torsion, moves in both directions, besides the fact that it leaves transverse waves and longitudinal waves biting the dust much, much faster than transverse wave or a longitudinal wave. Torsion wave is the fastest thing imaginable, and that shows, at least if you're talking about evidence, you want to convince yourself, if that's what people want to introduce, it does show that, you know, the rope is a good model for, and torsion with it, right, for what light is and what light does. Okay, and then here's a final version of that. If here you have the mathematical physics version. We put a retro reflector on the moon, and we received at least signals, you know, the laser beam right back on Earth. So it's like if it went in a straight line, and the round trip was 2.4 light seconds. Okay, and so this is how, in a dynamic mode, the Earth is moving, and so is the moon, and it covered, you know, all this distance, which is 1 light second, 1.2, I think it was, light seconds. That's the distance from the Earth to the reflector. And both the moon and the Earth are moving. The Earth is moving at 30 kilometers per second, and the moon is moving about 1 kilometer per second around the Earth. Okay, and so here you have a little motion there, a little over. What I say, these 75 kilometers that the Earth moved in the time the photon went and came back. And so it had to go through warp space. How is it that we got this photon back? Okay, how is it that we can see the reflection in the mirror over there in this retro reflector that we placed on the moon? Not for flat earthers, obviously, because they don't believe we went to the moon. Okay, so it's only for globular earthers. Okay, and then here's the model from the rope model. You know, all atoms are interconnected, so the atom in the retroreflector are connected to every atom on Earth, and that's why all we have is a torsion that travels in both directions simultaneously, and that's why the moon can go anywhere it wants. The laser beam will always find it. All you have to do is point the laser at the retroreflector, which is what the people in Houston actually do. I think the reflector somewhere else, but and that's why we get the signal right back, because what you have there is ray reversibility. Light retraces its path because light travels in both directions simultaneously. Okay, and with that, I will see you next time. What is it, Sunday? We'll see you then. Bye-bye.